Created by Mike Bethell, Thomas Was Alone is a 2D puzzle platformer with a very minimalistic aesthetic. Initially little more than a Flash game released on Corgate, Bethell continued to develop and refine Thomas Was Alone until its eventual release on PC and PSN in February 2013. I didn't actually buy Thomas Was Alone when it first came out, and instead picked it up during the Steam Summer Sale. Prior to playing it though, I heard a lot of buzz about the game which got me really interested in it. The whole gimmick was how it could make you feel attached to a featureless red block, and I have to admit, as someone who's rather fond of platformers, it certainly got my attention. Did it meet my expectations though? Well, kinda. The story of Thomas Was Alone is either really easy or really difficult to explain, depending on how you look at it. You play as Thomas, an artificial intelligence that recently gained sentience and is trying to learn more about the world he inhabits. The majority of the story is told through voiceovers that persist throughout the game, with additional context from brief text blurbs that show up at the beginning of some levels. Through the course of the game, you will control numerous multicolored shapes, helping them work together to understand and escape their two-dimensional world. Thomas Was Alone's story is one of the game's best aspects. The voiceover offers keen insights into the personality and opinions of each AI under your control, and I found myself surprisingly invested in the plight of what are essentially featureless shapes. As one of the strongest qualities of the game, I don't want to ruin too much of the story here, but I will promise you that if you're anything like me, this game's surprisingly effective voiceover might actually get you feeling choked up.
As they struggled to get to the next portal, John hoped that he would be the next to get eaten. He didn't want to be alone.
Thomas Was Alone has a very minimalistic art style, though it's not without its distinction and charm. Everything from the AIs you play as to the world they inhabit is constructed from right angles and solid shapes. On the bright side, I think you could probably run this game on a potato, and at full settings too. Even on the highest preset, I was able to run Thomas Was Alone without dropping frames, even while Fraps was running. And if you're no stranger to my channel, you'll know my computer sometimes drops frames when it runs Isaac, so that's a plus. For such a simple game, it also looks surprisingly good, though you'll definitely notice some rough edges if you turn down the settings for some reason. There isn't really a lot of fat to trim, so any reduction in fidelity is extremely noticeable. Still, for a game essentially developed in his spare time, Mike Bethell did a pretty good job making it look distinct and memorable. I would have to say that my favorite part of Thomas Was Alone has to be its music. A combination of light orchestral notes and synthesized electronica, the game's music is extremely atmospheric and does a great job setting the mood. Speaking as someone who has more than one video game soundtrack on his computer, I'll definitely hope to add this one to my collection. Though certainly less noticeable than the score, the sound effects do a very good job at helping to differentiate the various AI under your control. Heavy Claire has a laborious note to her jumps and lands with a solid impact, while John's springy vaults and light landings sound much more energetic. That being said, there are some sound effects that will get grating after a while, such as the one made whenever someone bounces on Laura, though that might be purely due to a gratuitous repetition. Thomas Was Alone is a platformer first and foremost, so you can expect to do a lot of jumping, sliding, and spike dodging throughout the relatively short playtime. Clocking in at around 4 hours, the game will introduce you to a varied cast of quadrilaterals with varying capabilities which you will need to use to accomplish your goals. Said goal will involve arranging said shapes in certain predetermined points throughout the level, with the use of their unique special abilities. The puzzle part of this puzzle platformer is in how the AI are used, which can involve using one to give another a boost or ferrying multiple AIs across an expanse of harmful water. Platforming is a mixed bag as far as Thomas Was Alone is concerned, passable on the surface but not without its problems. Rather than moving a set speed, the AIs will accelerate when they first start moving in a direction, reaching their full speed shortly thereafter. The resulting controls end up feeling very slippery and unwieldy, especially when the game calls upon you to make precision jumps, which is quite often. On the subject of jumping, however fast you're moving when you jump affects how far you travel. I know this seems like a minor point, but this mechanic often resulted in me attempting a jump I thought I could make, only to find I didn't get a big enough run up and then plummeting to my death. Look at a game like Super Meat Boy, where each jump height is affected by how long the jump button is held, and your trajectory is influenced primarily by the direction you hold and not the speed you were traveling at prior to leaving the ground. As a platformer, Thomas Was Alone could have done with much tighter controls. Sometimes it's the level design that's the problem, however. More than once I found myself extremely frustrated with Thomas Was Alone, more often because I knew what I was supposed to be doing, but the layout of the stage made it very difficult to progress. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing the difficulty, but rather how punishing the game tends to be for relatively minor mistakes. The game often expects you to perform long sequences of jumps without a single mistake, and has no qualms about sending you right back to the beginning of the area should you screw up. These sequences are made all the more difficult by the camera, which seldom feels anything but constrained, with the game offering no method for panning or zooming out to get a better idea of what you're doing. More than once I took AIs halfway across a level only to realize their intended destination lay in the exact opposite direction. Combined with the slippery controls and the sometimes frustrating micromanaging of all the AIs to set up and try again, these difficult instances can result in replaying half of the level over a dozen times. On the subject of micromanaging your AIs, there are points in the game where you will have more than 4 shapes to deal with, and you'll need to switch through all of them in order to progress. You can cycle through your available AI, which will also be listed in the lower right hand corner of the screen. Unfortunately, there's no way to pick a specific shape to take control of, unless that AI is immediately before or after the one you're controlling in the sequence. This sequence changes from level to level too, which oftentimes made me skip right past the AI had meant to possess. The camera doesn't immediately switch to your new character either, but instead pans between them just a little too slowly, which results in jarring transitions. As a result, there are some levels where I was changing AIs so frequently that I gave myself motion sickness. When the level design wasn't trying to frustrate or outright kill me with spikes that were just out of sight or shifters in very awkward positions, it was driving me insane with certain inexplicable habits it had, mostly to do with moving platforms. Firstly, if you're on a platform that is rising, you often can't jump. Whether this is because the platform is rising too fast for your jump to outrun it, or because it flings you skyward when it reaches its peak varies, but being unable to jump over the platform simply because it is going up is the very definition of broken. Then there's the platforms that move from side to side. I don't know how many times I found myself stuck to the side of a platform as it moved towards me, unable to jump or move away from it. Just about every time this happened, I either ended up dying or having to restart the whole level. Also, as a somewhat minor point, I think this game could have really done with a color blindness mode. Near the beginning of the game, each AI is color-coded, but if you have difficulty with colors like I do, you might find the sequence provided at the bottom of the screen less than helpful when it comes to switching shapes. There's also a mechanic introduced in the final part of the game which allows you to impart certain characteristics on AI by moving them through differently colored patterns on the background. Distinguishing which pattern does what is based on its color, and having difficulty telling the difference between blue and gray or red and pink resulted in some confusion and more than one unfortunate death. All in all, Thomas Was Alone was a mixed experience for me. I was really engaged by the story and got heavily invested in the characters and their journey. But there was also several times when the game aggravated me to the point that I had to stop playing it entirely. As a result, it's really difficult for me to give this one a recommendation. I think that if someone's ready to be surprised by the story the way I was, it's certainly worth weathering the rougher portions of the gameplay to get through. But if you're looking for a really solid puzzle platformer with tight controls and innovative gameplay, you're really better off looking somewhere else. Thomas Was Alone is available on the PSN and on Steam, where you can find it for a very reasonable price if you want to give it a look. Thank you everyone for watching. If you liked what you saw here, then let me know down below, and if you'd like to see more, just hit that subscribe button. I'll hopefully be doing this again sometime in the near future.